The Collector by Omar Cuellar. I entered that old, seemingly abandoned house on the outskirts of Woodstock, Vermont, with my heart pounding hard in my chest. The air was thick with dust and dampness, and every creak of the floorboards beneath my boots sounded so sinister that I was tempted to turn around, get back in my car, and drive straight to the station. I had received an anonymous tip about a suspect hiding there, and despite everything, my detective instincts pushed me to investigate. The house looked as if it had been empty for years, broken windows veiled in cobwebs, furniture draped in yellowed sheets, and a clinging smell of mold that got under your skin. I moved forward cautiously, flashlight in my right hand, sweeping every dark corner until I reached a room at the very back. There, on a tattered mattress on the floor, lay a man sleeping peacefully, as though the outside world didn't exist. It was Joe Slater, the fugitive we'd been hunting. I crept closer, woke him with a firm tap on the shoulder, and before he could react, snapped the handcuffs on. "You're under arrest, you damn murderer," I told him, in my most commanding voice, as I dragged him toward the exit. He blinked in confusion, but offered no resistance, as if he'd known this moment was inevitable. I took him straight to the Woodstock Police Station, a modest red brick building that stood out against the rural calm of the town. Joe Slater was formally charged with first-degree murder. He had killed a 50-year-old man named Harold Jenkins, who owned a high-end shop selling lamps and fine candelabras in the center of town. Jenkins had been a respected craftsman who imported elegant pieces from Europe, and his death had shaken the entire community. I had found him stabbed to death in his own store, surrounded by shattered crystal and twisted metal, as if some uncontrollable rage had exploded there. While preparing the interrogation in a cold, poorly lit room with a scratched metal table and uncomfortable chairs, I couldn't stop wondering about the motive. Why would a guy like Slater, with no serious prior record, do something like this? There had been no obvious robbery, no clear sign of revenge. I started the recorder, sat down across from him, and began the routine questions. Joe looked at me with sunken eyes, as though sizing me up, answering in monosyllables. But when I finally asked why, his expression changed. "All right, Detective Malone," he said with a crooked smile. "I'll tell you my story. I was 11 when I discovered I had a special gift, a gift that has since become a curse. It was at 11 that I realized the world is an infinite tapestry of fascinating details," Joe began, his voice growing stronger as the memories came alive. "I lived right here in Woodstock when I started wandering the forest trails. I could spend hours studying a single wildflower, noticing how its petals curved with mathematical precision, or watching the erratic flight of a butterfly. Then I extended my walks into town, the house facades with their fogged windows, porches decorated with old rocking chairs, architectural details like carved moldings or stone chimneys. People's faces fascinated me too. The way an old woman wrinkled her nose when she laughed, or how a child ran with arms spread wide pretending to be an airplane. I would stand motionless, absorbing every shade, every texture, every movement. It was as if the world unfolded before me in endless layers, and I couldn't look away. My parents didn't understand what was wrong with me," he continued, leaning forward as though confessing a long-buried secret. "They scolded me constantly, saying it was rude to stare at people like that. 'You're making them feel stalked, Joe,' they'd say sternly, worried about complaints from neighbors. I remember once standing in front of the Thompsons' house for half an hour, admiring how the setting sun painted long shadows across their garden. Mr. Thompson came storming out, yelling at me to get lost before he called the police. That night my parents punished me, explaining that it wasn't right to loiter outside other people's homes, that the owners might get scared and think I was a thief, or worse. They tried distracting me with toys or books, that nothing worked. It wasn't just curiosity. It was a compulsion, a need to capture those moments in my mind. Instead of giving it up, I got better at hiding it. I went out at dawn or dusk when fewer people would see me, and I kept observing in secret, feeling a forbidden thrill that made me feel truly alive. Over time, the habit grew worse, more intrusive, Joe went on, his tone turning inward. I'd walk into town shops and stand in a corner staring at the merchandise for endless minutes. In the bakery, I studied how bread browned in the oven, noticing the air bubbles in the dough. In the hardware store, I admired the metallic gleam of tools lined up in perfect rows. In the end, I never bought anything. I just left silently, leaving the owners baffled. Some politely asked me to leave, thinking I was a shy kid. Others started whispering about that weird boy. My parents tried local therapy, but nothing changed. It was as if my mind was collecting those details for some greater purpose I didn't yet fully understand. When I became a teenager, things got riskier, he said, a spark of adrenaline lighting his eyes at the memory. I started breaking into abandoned buildings on the outskirts of Woodstock, collapsed barns with caved-in roofs, old ivy-covered factories, ghostly houses where the wind whistled through cracks. I'd climb in through broken windows, exploring dusty rooms, touching forgotten furniture, watching how time had eroded everything. Abandoned architecture fascinated me, exposed beams like skeletons, wallpaper peeling away to reveal layers of history. I could spend hours there, motionless, drinking in the decay. But soon that wasn't enough. As the years passed, I began sneaking into occupied homes, drawn by the life pulsing inside. On dark nights, I'd pick locks with improvised tools and slip into living rooms or kitchens just to watch. A ticking clock on the wall, a family sleeping in the distance, everyday details people took for granted. It was addictive, like collecting invisible trophies. One time, I got caught by the police, Joe confessed, lowering his voice as if reliving the fear. I was in a house downtown, staring at a family portrait on the living room wall, when the owner woke up and saw me. He screamed, turned on the lights, and called the cops. They arrested me that night, handcuffed like a common criminal, and I spent hours in a cold cell being questioned by incredulous officers. "What were you doing in there? Stealing?" they kept asking. But I hadn't taken anything. I was only watching. Since there was no evidence of theft or damage, and it was my first recorded offense, I was released with a severe warning. The judge looked at me with pity and recommended therapy, but I walked free. My parents were devastated, and I swore I'd change, but the compulsion was stronger. I carried on, more cautious, choosing remote targets. It was as if my mind needed those details. Harold Jenkins's shop was paradise, filled with gleaming, elegant candelabras, hand-cut crystals that scattered light into multicolored prisms, bronze lamps with intricate designs. The first time I went in, I was drawn by the window display, and I stood there entranced, watching light dance across every piece. I would stay for minutes, sometimes hours, moving slowly between the shelves, tracing the curves of the candelabra arms, the flawless polish of the metal. At first, Jenkins thought I was just an eccentric customer and left me alone, maybe hoping for a sale. But he soon noticed other customers growing uneasy. They'd glance at me sideways and hurry their purchases. One day, he came over and banned me. "You're creepy, kid. You're scaring people away," he said firmly. I left humiliated, but the obsession only grew. One night I couldn't stand it anymore, Joe recounted, crossing his arms. I broke a back window with a rock wrapped in cloth to muffle the sound and slipped inside. The place was dark, but I turned on a small flashlight and stayed there all night, studying the candelabras in the dim beam. I touched their cold surfaces, examined every facet of the crystal, lost myself in their ethereal beauty. It was as if I were storing every detail in my mind. At dawn, Harold Jenkins walked in through the front door, saw the broken window, then saw me standing motionless among his candelabras. His face twisted in rage. He marched over, practically spitting in my face, and screamed at me to leave him alone, to go to hell. His words echoed in my head like thunder. I panicked, bolted, and jumped back through the broken window before the police arrived. They never caught me that time. I moved through the town like a ghost. The next day I went back, Joe admitted, his voice darkening. I found Harold alone, restocking merchandise, and without thinking I attacked him. I stabbed him with a knife I'd brought, watching his blood stain the crystals he loved so much. I fled, but not before studying his lifeless body, as if that too were a detail to capture. I didn't steal anything. It wasn't revenge. I just had to stop him. Exasperated, I demanded, "Just tell me once and for all, why did you kill Harold Jenkins? Were you trying to rob the store or not?" Joe shook his head, smiling enigmatically. It wasn't revenge, and I didn't want to rob him. I simply had to stop him. "Stop what? I don't understand," I replied, a chill creeping up my spine. "He wouldn't stop showing up in my dreams," Joe answered calmly. "You're completely insane. I don't understand a damn thing you're saying," I insisted, my mind spinning. "Don't you see?" he challenged. "Can't you solve the mystery? You, the great detective? I told you at the beginning of this interrogation. I have a gift that turned into a curse. Still can't guess what it is?" I stayed silent, trying to piece it together, but Joe went on. "Fine, I'll tell you. When I was a child, I realized I could choose any aspect of reality that interested me and then bring it into my nighttime dreams. That is, if there was a building, a flower, an animal, or a person I wanted to dream about, all I had to do was observe them carefully. Then they would reappear in my dreams. That's how I became a collector of pieces of reality. But damn, Harold, he screamed in my face, and for some strange reason after that, he kept invading my dreams," Joe explained, his face hardening. "I had to get rid of him in the real world, and once I did, he vanished from my dreams too. Now I can keep collecting whatever aspects of reality I want and bring them into my dreams at night." "What's wrong, Detective Malone? Why can't you speak anymore? Have you finally figured it out? Have you realized that you're just one of my dreams too?" I fell silent. I began to feel the world collapsing around me. Joe continued, "In the real world you collect garbage, but yesterday afternoon when I saw your face I thought, that guy looks like a detective, and that's why you're here. I hope you're happy with the role I gave you in my dream." I remained silent, this time because I was too stunned to speak. In truth, I was nothing more than a detail captured inside the disturbed mind of Joe Slater.